Up, everyone? How's it going? Just gonna give it a moment for my co-host Nick to get signed in, and then we'll get going. Hope everyone's well. Got some updates for you on the CARES Act and the PPP loan and a bunch of details. But of course, just as a reminder, to the extent to which you have questions, drop them in the Q&A. A lot easier for us to track when they're in the Q&A rather than in the chat. So drop your questions, whatever they may be, in the Q&A, not in the chat. Of course, you're welcome to throw whatever you want in the chat, like pleasantries or telling Nick how appropriately close he is to his camera. Feel free to drop those in the chat. But otherwise, questions in the Q&A. Nick, how's it going?
It's going. I spent the last 2 hours with my business partner, Dan G. I don't know how to say his last name. Nobody does. Building a pretty cool webinar, pretty cool training. So,
awesome. So
recovering from that.
Continues, huh?
What's that?
There's Pickles, by the way. She's ready to participate.
Let me see here. Somebody just said they're
while
trying
you
to join.
signed in, I directed everyone to the Q&A, so we tackled that already. Anything that you want to add before we get going?
Yeah, we're going to standard. I'm going to just keep repeating this every time until it gets down. We're going to do our best to stay on track to get through the content in a nice linear fashion. What that does is it allows us to share the replays with you, and you don't have to go through all the tangentially related things to get to the meat and potatoes. So drop your Q&A. Please give it context. So if Dan says, Rule 3.7 states yada, 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 if you have a question about it in the Q&A, say, hey, regarding Rule 3.7, so try to give us context so that we can help you. But we're going to go through whatever. Every day we do this, we're going to go through the training. We're going to have the conversation. We're going to get through the important stuff. So the replay is super valuable to you. And then we're going to look straight to the Q&A for questions. Awesome to have conversation in the chat. So just to help you out here, at the bottom, there's a little chat button. Just chat, say whatever you want, have conversation. That's fine. When Q&A comes up, we're going to go directly to the Q&A. There's a little Q&A button down there. And I will generally skip the questions that don't have context and then come back to them if there's time. So do yourself a favor to get your question answered and just add some context. And at the end, we're going to talk about some of the ways we're going to restructure and reorganize these calls. So if you can stick around, great. If not, catch the replay so you can kind of get up to date on how these calls are going to be structured.
Awesome. All right, great. Thanks, Nick. So wore my best horse shirt today. Unfortunately, it's also my only horse shirt, but it feels like feels appropriate today because I feel like we're kind of in the wild, wild west at this point where we're all shooting from the hip a little bit and things are rapidly changing on a day-to-day basis as more information comes out. So Monday, we went through all 3 of the coronavirus-related acts and broke each of those down, okay? The biggest one to date, I guess, is the CARES Act, which was approved last Friday. And so we've got, we broke down all 3 of them. So if you want some context on those 3, go back and watch that specific replay. Then yesterday we gave some more specifics based off data that we got in terms of what the process looked like. And now today we've got even more information and updates in terms of the process itself. So, and I expect that will kind of continue on for the foreseeable future, at least the next couple of days, as the IRS and the Secretary of Treasury and the Small Business Administration try to work through all these components and roll out all the forms and required documentation and so on and so forth. So no one is really an expert at these set of issues at this point by virtue of the fact the rules just aren't out yet. So again, I know I'm like on this drumbeat, but be very leery of if you get a marketer or some financial person who's reaching out saying that they're an expert on all this. They can't possibly be by virtue of the fact this stuff is so new and the rules are still getting processed at a fairly rapid rate relative, in particular to just in general the rate in which the government moves, and especially in light of the situation that we all find ourselves in. So with that, I know everyone loves it when I try and do a screen share, so I'm going to do that and probably botch it, and look forward to whatever commentary you guys have in the chat on that. But with that, do you see my PowerPoint deck? Should say COVID-19 planning updates.
You got it. First try.
Cool. All right. No big deal. But I think I got the share figured out for now.
You are an expert. You are an expert in this thing.
I'm now an expert in sharing my screen via Zoom. So you guys, by now, if you're showing up, you know me, Dan Nicholson, founder, CEO of Nth Degree CPAs. Been in this whole accounting industry for approaching 20 years, going back to doing a fellowship at the board that writes all the accounting standards. So initially focused on hedging, derivatives, so all the capital markets, banking stuff. And that's really where I spent the initial part of my career. Worked for a Warren Buffett-backed company getting ready to go public. Worked with the now CFO of Roku in strategic finance, and then some time in tax. So I've kind of done the range of things. But for the last 10 years, my main focus has been on helping small business owners and individuals get financial certainty. And so that's why we're doing these day-to-day calls, because there's an incredible amount of uncertainty. So that's me. If you don't know who I am, I think most of you probably do at this point that are tuning in, but I know we've got some new guests. So with that, I wanted to summarize where things stand currently, because there are two SBA loans. And this is where it's confusing, because you access these loans in two different spots. So the first SBA loan is the SBA disaster loan. Again, the whole concept of the disaster loan that's not new. It's been around when we have, unfortunately, when we have emergencies, whether it's primarily natural disasters. So the whole structure of disaster loan has been around, but right now we have basically, if you were economically impacted by the disaster, so EIDL, economic impact disaster loan. And so if you're economically impacted by it, which just about everybody was at this point, although I do have several clients, especially in the technology and e-commerce space, who are thriving, but to the extent to which you were economically impacted, that's the disaster loan, and it's up to $2 million. This is also where you go to request the $10,000 advance. So the same application that you submit to apply for the disaster loan is where you also request the $10,000 advance, which is basically intended to be a grant, so tax-free money. So here's the link, and if you've seen our other trainings, you'll know that this website is on its third iteration at this point. So whatever you submitted in the past, irrelevant at this point. Maybe the SBA will use some of that information, but they're still asking you to go back and submit this new application. And so it should take you less than 12 minutes to complete. And so you start with eligible entity verification. So most of you are going to just check applicant is a business with not more than 500 employees, but check the one that's appropriate for you. You may also be an applicant who operates under a sole proprietorship with or without employees or as an independent contractor. So a lot of folks have asked me, hey, do I apply for any of these loans if I'm a sole prop? Basically a team of one, no employees. I've got a bunch of vendors or a bunch of companies who pay me. Yep, there it is right here, with or without employees. Okay, so you would apply. You're eligible for both the advance and for the economic disaster loan. And then you have to check all of these boxes. So they all have to apply to you. If you can't check all these boxes, then you can't proceed. So I'm just going to check them. And now when you get to this page is basic information. So I'm not going to go through and fill it all in at this point. But this page, business information, and then the next one, business owner's information, is just providing, what is your name, Nth Degree CPAs. What is your trade name? Well, in actuality, Nth Degree CPAs is our trade name. Our legal name is called Three Peaks Accounting. because at one point I had 3 businesses, an accounting business, a real estate investment business, and an investment management company. They were all part of this overall holding company. So I had a really cheesy 3 peaks, 3 businesses. I'm not a branding person, clearly by that name, but how we actually do business is Nth Degree CPA. So that's our trade name. One business can have many trade names. It's whatever you're registered with your state. And then you put in your tax ID number, and it says SSN for sole proprietorship. So again, if you're a one-person team and you may not have registered for an EIN yet, I'd encourage you to, because you don't want to give out your Social Security number all over the place. At least I personally don't. And you can go request an EIN online through the IRS website, and it's instantaneous. But if you don't have one yet, put in your Social Security number, pick your entity type, sole proprietorship, so on and so forth, whatever you may be, S corporation. Is the applicant a nonprofit organization? This loan type does apply to nonprofits as well as for-profit businesses. So mark appropriately. Are you a franchise? Mark appropriately. And then they're looking at gross revenues. So top line revenues. What do you collect or accrue in revenues for the 12 months prior to the date of January 31st, 2020? So I interpreted that as February 1st, 2019 through January 31st, 2020. So grab that information, grab your cost of goods sold. So sale of inventory. If you're a service-based business, it doesn't say cost of service sold, but I interpret it to mean that that's also relevant. And so if you're a service-based business, put in your labor costs to deliver your services. So, just for illustrative purposes. And then you'll note these are asterisks, so they're required. These are not. So rental properties, this is for if you have residential or commercial, nonprofit. This is combined operating expenses for all secular social services provided by the faith-based entities, so probably not applicable. And then you have to describe what these other sources are if you included some information in those boxes. Put in your address, when the business was established, so on and so forth. Next. I didn't fill it all in, so it won't let me advance. But on the next tab, you're going to put in the same stuff about each owner who owns more than 20%. And then on the next page after that, you're going to check whether or not you want to receive the $10,000 advance. I don't know why you would not want to check that box. So check it, put in your banking information, and hit submit. That is the process. So like I said, 10 to 12 minutes to go through it. You do not have to complete the actual economic impact disaster loan if you want to receive the $10,000 advance. So you do not have to complete the loan and receive the funds and all that to get the advance. But in order to get the advance, you have to complete this application. Now, once you go through this whole process, that's it. At some point, the SBA is going to reach out to you and they may ask for additional information. So if you looked at the previous iterations, they asked you to fill out personal financial statements. They asked you to provide more details about your business. They're not asking for that information currently. I imagine because they were so flooded with, this is just my own speculation, so flooded with requests that they built this initial form to handle that $10,000 advance, but also to potentially apply some criteria to filter out who they're going to request information from. That's just speculation on the filtering part. But right now, there's no sign in to create a login like there was before. There's no place to upload any documents. If they need them, they're going to reach out separately. But when you get to the end, summary, you're going to get an application number. And I take a screenshot of that so that you've got it for your records. But that's it for this process. And I don't see any reason why you would not, if you haven't already, if you have a business or you're a sole proprietorship acting as an independent contractor, team of one, few people pay you, go here, apply, request the $10,000 advance, and then we're waiting to hear what else. Okay. Separately, there is the SBA Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP. And this is a loan up to $10 million that's applied for at banks, credit unions, etc. So you don't go through while it's sponsored by the SBA, that's where the bank is going to receive the funds. The SBA is administering this. You do not apply through the SBA website. Completely separate process. And now we have an application, a sample application. So this is where things are moving relatively quick at this point. And this just came out basically end of day yesterday, where we got the application, but it's a sample. So from, again, what I've heard from my banking partners is that they can't begin to process anything until the 3rd, so Friday. So even if they have the applications and all that ready, they can't begin to process until Friday. That matches with what the Secretary of Treasury has on their website, that their intention is to open the process on the 3rd. They also said in the letter that they are looking to do same-day processing of applications, which would be relatively unprecedented. And so it's a bold proclamation. I hope that it's true. I don't know if banks will have the bandwidth to collect your information, process it, and release payment same day. Certainly an optimistic target. I wouldn't bank on that. Most, we say in terms of our principles, that we don't want to speculate on the future. So the most conservative thing to do is take action based off what you know today. And so don't start making decisions based off like, I'm going to receive this funding on Friday. We don't know. That's the optimistic view. Again, stuff is moving very quickly, and I hope that that ends up being the case. So we go here, download this form. Now it's a 4-page document, but 2 of the 4 pages are description. And I want to zoom in here. Let me find exactly where it is, because they always provide a description on these government documents on how long it should take you to complete this process. And let's see if I can find it again. Oh, here we go. I'm highlighting it. I don't know if you guys can see the highlighting. You see that, Nick?
Yes.
The estimated time for completing this application, including gathering data needed, is 8 minutes. So I've been on my drumbeat about you do not need to pay some high-ticket accounting firm $2,500 plus, which I know a lot of my competitive firms are pushing this to get assistance. They are trying to do this same day, which means this cannot be an overwhelming amount of data, and that the amount of time to complete it has to be relatively short. So 8 minutes. In general, I'd be happy to pay, if someone wanted to pay me $2,500 for 8 minutes of work. In general, I wouldn't say no to that, but I don't like to take advantage of people's in moments of need. So again, I don't think you need to necessarily go out and hire someone. So with that, let's walk through the document. Business legal name, trademark. So similar to what we just went through on the SBA disaster loan, we got legal name, the doing business as or trade name, your address, your tax ID number, EIN or SSN. Again, they're asking for SSN because you may be a sole proprietorship and you could qualify as well for this. Business phone number, primary contact. And then we get down to the actual calculation of average monthly payroll times 2.5 equals loan amount. And then the number of jobs. Okay. And so this right here, this number, average monthly payroll times 2.5 will be the maximum loan amount that you'll qualify for. And then you would check what you're going to use the funds for, and then you're going to fill out your ownership information for anyone who has more than 20%. So it's the same exact information that you put in for the disaster loan. And then we're going to answer some basic questions about ownership. You know, basically, are you barred from filing, so on and so forth. So some yes or no. Down here, has the business received an SBA economic injury disaster loan? If yes, provide details. Received is the key word here in my estimation, not have you filed for an SBA economic disaster loan. So we're still going to file to get the $10,000 advance. And the SBA disaster loan could, even though the limit is $2 million, that may still be more funds because you can use it for working capital than you would get through this application process, because this is based off payroll times 2.5. Now I'm going to tell you here in a moment what is going to go into payroll, because it's in the instructions down below. So we're going to go to that in a minute. But I just wanted to highlight that it says, have you received, not applied. I think that's an important distinguishment. Are you under indictment, any felonies or misdemeanors in the last 7 years, or U.S. citizen? And then we get down to, I've read, I will comply, so on and so forth. And we start making some certifications. And each business owner that has more than 20% needs to initial. And so first we're saying, current economic uncertainty makes this loan request necessary to support the ongoing operations of the applicant. We just have to assert that that's the case, that we've been impacted and we have uncertainty. In the disaster loan, you have to ultimately provide the data to show that you've been impacted. So here you just have to assert that you've been impacted, whereas over in the disaster loan, you have to provide the data. Then we have to say the funds will be used to retain workers and maintain payroll or make the following: mortgage payments, lease payments, etc. I understand that if the funds are used for unauthorized purposes, the federal government may pursue criminal federal charges. So on Monday, when we went through this process, I was telling you guys about how people have been speculating about how I can get the loan, I'm going to let everybody go, and then I'm going to hire them back on June 15th because the law had a statement about how you need to restore your employees by a certain time frame to get the forgiveness. Well, right here we have, that's not the intention of the law. It's called Paycheck Protection Program on purpose. And so I don't think you're going to get the forgiveness. And in fact, you may even have criminal fraud charges applied if you get the funds and you don't actually use them for the intended purposes. Documentation verifying the number of full-time equivalent employees on payroll, as well as other dollar amounts of payroll costs covered, so on and so forth. For the 8-week period following this loan will be provided to the lender. So in the period after the loan, so the loan closes, we have to provide the data for the 8 weeks that precede, or 8 weeks that follow the loan origination. In part because we asserted here why we were getting the loan to begin with. And also that 8-week period is the period that forgiveness, the period that we're going to use to calculate how much of the loan is being forgiven. So with that, then we come down here, and this is just further support in my mind that the game of letting all your employees go and then taking the loan, using the loan for whatever you want, and then hiring them back, and you're going to get the loan forgiven. Then we've got loan forgiveness will be provided for the sum of documented payroll costs, covered mortgage, covered rent, covered utilities. And then due to likely high subscription, it is anticipated that not more than 25% of the forgiven loan may be for non-payroll costs. In other words, again, if you let go your employees, you can't have more than 25% of the proceeds going to non-payroll costs. So again, the intention is to use these funds to retain your employees primarily, and that you can use some of it for debt and utility payments. And then during the period beginning on February 15th through December 31st, applicant has not or will not receive another loan under this program. And it says this program, I don't believe this encapsulates the disaster loan. But specifically, you can't go to multiple banks and request the PPP. You can have one PPP loan. You can take the disaster loan and refinance it into a PPP loan. That's fine. But you can't go and get a PPP loan from multiple banks. And then you're just further solidifying that you provided all the necessary supporting documentation, and that the lender will calculate eligible loan amount using tax documents I've submitted. Okay, tax documents I've submitted. So we don't know exactly what tax documents those will be, probably payroll filings. So that is the process, but maybe more importantly, everything comes back to what do we put in this box right here? So let me drop down here because the instructions, and these are samples, so it's possible that this will change on Friday when things go live incrementally, but this is the baseline. So we've got, for purposes of calculating average monthly payroll, most applicants will use the average monthly payroll for 2019, excluding costs over $100,000 on an annualized basis for each employee. So you take each employee that was on payroll for 2019 and you adjust for any salaries that were more than 100,000, both that they were paid more than 100,000, but also accounting for if they were hired middle of the year and you annualize their salary, so you took their salary times 12, to the extent to which it was going to exceed 100 grand, you need to adjust that down. I'm going to put together a spreadsheet for you guys to dump in your salaries and do this calculation, and so that will be available for you to download. If you have a seasonal business, then you can elect to use average monthly payroll for the period between February 15th, 2019 and June 30th. Again, excluding costs over 100 grand on an annualized basis. If you have a new business, then you'd use average monthly payroll for the period of January 1st, 2020 through February 29th. Again, excluding costs over 100 grand. Okay. So we're going to look back to last year's payroll, and we're going to figure out the average, so average monthly amount, and that total is going to end up going into this box. Now, there's a few other things beyond just wages that go into it. So let me get this PowerPoint back up. So what costs are eligible for payroll? Compensation, so salary, wages, commission, etc. This is the amount that's capped at 100 grand, including payments for vacation or any sort of leave, allowances for dismissal or separation, and then in addition, payments required for provisions of group health care benefits, including insurance premiums, payments of any retirement benefits. So if you're doing any sort of match for a 401k, simple IRA, SEP IRA, those amounts would be includable. And then payment of state or local tax assessed. So portions that you're paying for state unemployment, LNI, et cetera, would be includable. Now I have this asterisk down here because there's some speculation that payments to sole proprietors, so contractors that you're paying, that are sole proprietors, so not corporations, but teams of one, will be includable as payroll. So there's speculation on this mostly from Bank of America that will be able to include payments to sole proprietors as part of the payroll number, and that it would be capped at 100,000, just like other wages are capped as at 100,000. So it's prudent at this point to gather the information and have it ready when this goes live on Friday. It's also prudent to reach out to your bank or bankers and let them know that you intend to apply. What I've heard is that the banks are going to bias towards existing customers, which makes a lot of sense. Why would you not favor your existing customers? Plus, when we're all like sheltering in place to a degree, how do we go into a bank anyways? And so on Monday and Tuesday, I heard hard fast from the bankers, we're going to only lend to existing customers. And today I got a few emails saying we're going to make it available to everyone. So I don't know if the SBA has come back and said, hey, you can't mandate that you're only going to lend to existing customers. But practically speaking, when you're in a rush, trying to get this done, trying to establish a new banking relationship on top of that, seems like a lot of additional effort for potentially no incremental gain. So I would go directly to your existing bank unless there's some more extreme scenario that exists between you and the bank at this point, some tenuous relationship. But otherwise, I'd go directly to your bank or banker and let them know that you would like to apply for this when it's available. I know that at least some local credit unions have stood up some websites where you can submit your information to say, I would like to receive the application when it's ready. I will be checking with some of the larger national banks to see if they have a submission form that I'll try to get out to all of you in the event that you guys don't have a personal banker that you're working with that you can just email. This is a great example, though, of why we need to always bias relationships over transactions, in the sense that ideally in this situation, you have a banker that you can email that you have a relationship with who's going to send you the stuff as soon as it's available, rather than having to go to the website or having to go call a 1-800 number and get stuck in the queue. So obviously we can't go back and undo that, but on a go-forward basis, if you don't have a relationship with a banker, now is the time to really establish one, so that in times of need, you have someone to reach out to. So to back up and summarize, we've got the SBA disaster loan. That's what we apply through the SBA website. At this link, it takes about 10 to 12 minutes. Almost all of the information that you put in this application is going to be the same information that you put into the PPP. The only difference is going to be the payroll amount that you're going to need to enter on the PPP application. So do the disaster loan application now, save all that information so that you've got it ready to fill in this application, so you're not hunting around for it. You can look at the sample document here. You do not have to complete the disaster loan to get the $10,000 advance, but you do have to submit the form to get the advance to begin with. So I don't see any downside. You can refinance the disaster loan into the PPP. While the disaster loan has a lower balance, it doesn't mean that it's not the better road to go down, depending on your needs, because the PPP is just based off payroll. And if you're otherwise heavy in other expenses that aren't payroll, the disaster loan might be the better road for you. So we'll want to calculate what your potential loan amount is over here, and you can see the definition, etc., of what goes into payroll here on this slide. And like I said, I'll be putting together a checklist of what you should be gathering so that you are ready to fill out this form, assuming you'd like to apply when it's ready on Friday. So those are the updates, Nick. What did I miss?
I wouldn't know if you missed something. I just I wait for you to go through all the thousands of pages of stuff and tell me what it means. So yeah, we got a lot of questions real quick. Just while everybody's still on here, and want to make sure, like I said, we like to cut off the questions so that just to protect, the privacy integrity of the conversation. So before we cut that off, next week tomorrow we have Jedediah Collins.
Tomorrow we have Aaron Marburg from Bernstein.
Oh, that's right. That's right. We have Aaron from BNY coming back.
Aaron from Bernstein.
Bernstein. I'm sorry, I'm a mess today. If you guys saw Aaron the first time, he showed up, delivered a ton of value. They have a ton of research. I'm sure he has some new updates and stuff too, right?
Got some new updates. Yeah, they spend hundreds of millions in research every year. So
awesome.
They're usually fairly on the front lines about what's going on with the market and all of that. So we'll have Aaron on Thursday. Mm-hmm. Hopefully Jedediah Collins on Friday.
Yep.
He was a former NFL player, played with Drew Brees with the Saints for a few years. Then he became a financial advisor, financial expert, and in particular around just personal financial management and how to set up the right structures within your personal finances. Has an awesome new book out on the exact methodology for how to kind of structure your personal financials. So he's going to come on hopefully Friday and work through that.
Awesome.
There's a few other guests next week. Yeah,
we have so we have tomorrow and Friday, Aaron and Jedediah, both brilliant, both great presenters. I've been fortunate to talk to both of them, actually, one on Seeking Certainty and one on your podcast.
Yeah.
So quick update, anybody that is on this list anything COVID related, you will continue to get beyond this week. We're gonna do everything as normal this week. We're gonna continue to make sure that anything COVID related gets to you via replay. We may not always be able to invite you live, but we'll make sure you get the replay. To get on the list, to get invited and or the replays is cfeclass.com/oasis. Most of you should already be on that list if you're on here live. Really just saying it for anybody that catches the replay. You can also go to cfeclass.com/helpful. It's a shareable document. The stuff that we think is the most useful, we put in a document that you could just share with your friends, family, partners, clients. After next week, we're going to start getting into some more of Dan's intellectual property and break down additional revenue streams, right? The way to think about additional revenue streams in a way that is sustainable, and just being really intentional about adding revenue streams to your business. That will be available live, and the replays to private clients. So if you're a client event degree, if you're in the network, private clients, you have access to that, or anybody that has the platinum level cash flow engineering. And so if you want to look at that, that's cfeclass.com/offer. I'll put it in the chat here. CFE class. Oh, I see Dan already there. /offer. That's going to take you to the page where you can see kind of what it's all about. The platinum gives you a year access of live calls plus any of the stuff that we create during those live calls. And the next one will be we'll have cash flow engineering, we'll continue the office hours, and the whole training on adding additional streams of revenue. And if you enter promo code, if you go to cfeclass.com/offer and then click platinum and enter coupon code certainty, all caps. So I'll drop that in there too. That'll be available for the rest of the week. You get 60% off the whole platinum offer. So